Okay, I took a bunch of photos and I thought the easiest way to show you the sashing is to take a photo of each step of the process and explain it as we go along. So the first photo is showing you just that you need a strip that is 2 inches wide by the size of your block plus 1 inch. So if you're doing a 4-inch block, you need a 2-inch by 5-inch. If you're doing a 5-inch block, you need a 2-inch by 6-inch. You also need a 3 by 5, 3 by 6, or 3 by 7. And I chose exact sizes because this gives you 1/2 inch seam allowance on both edges, plus the exact size of your block. So if your block is a little bit less than the 5 inches or the 4 inches, we're going to work on 4 inches here. So I will continue talking about 4 inches, but you know that this applies to 5 and 6 as well. So if your block is a little bit smaller than the 4 inches, stretch it a little bit as you put the binding on so those strips will match up to the next piece. If it's a little larger, scooch it in a little bit. I know you all know how to sew, so you will be able to get this in the exact size. The next thing you want to do is take your 3-inch piece, fold it in half, and press it. You're going to use a folded piece on the top, the front part that is showing. The next thing you're going to do is match up your 2-inch piece to the back of your block, nice and even, and you see how there's exact size there, 1/2 inch seam allowance top and bottom, and you see that where I forgot to change my bobbin thread as usual, but my 4-inch block was cut at 5 inches. This 2-inch piece is cut at 5 inches long also, so it should be an exact match. If my block was maybe got pulled in a little bit while I stitched, a little tight, then I would give it a little bit of a stretch to make it fit this piece of sashing, because these pieces of sashing will then be joined to the next block and they all have to be uniform. Once you pin that back 2-inch piece of sashing on, flip it over, take your folded 3-inch piece, and with the open edge toward your pins, your outside edge, the folded edge goes inside toward the design, the open edge goes out toward the pins. You're going to match that up as well, and then pin that in place. Now you have your front folded piece pinned. You have your back folded, your back piece, 2-inch back piece pinned. Take it to your machine. The next thing you want to do is run a seam right down here using your satin, this satin, as a guide. For this I used my zipper foot. I have 2 different zipper foots, whichever, and I like this one because it's pretty stable and it can get right in that edge there, which I really like. Well, there's 2 thoughts on this. For this video, these photos, I stitched it directly on that edge of that satin, and you can feel it if you with your finger, like just feel down the edge of it, stitch it down. See, there's my stitching, and you will see up here, I didn't get close enough, and I'm going to show you that, but that's the stitching, 1/2 inch, and I left it at 1/2 inch for a reason. Normally, I would do everything at a 1/4 inch. I don't play with the extra fabric and all that bulk and all that nonsense. 1/4 inch is what I do in just about anything and everything. Even when I was making dresses, I didn't play with the 5/8 of an inch. I went to 1/4 inch, and it just worked. There was less bulk in the finished product, and that's really what you're looking for, the nicest finish you can get. So you've got your seam straight down. Here's your folded edge. Everything looks good. Now these are my sample blocks. Let's see if I need to turn this for you. There we go. So now I'll save it that way. I'm working directly on my computer here, so I thought this would be the best way. Now we've got that all done, we're going to pick up our next block. Make sure you have your layout. I would even take a photo of my layout and then print it out. So when you're putting these blocks together, you don't mistakenly pick up the wrong block, and then you have to tear it out, and what a pain that is. So this is my next block. I'm still working on samples. These are the contours that I can't release them. I don't like them. I just don't like them. Okay, now we're ready to attach that. Let's flip this around. Oh, maybe I gotta flip it. There we go. Is that upside down? Anyway, you'll get the idea. Okay, so don't worry about my backs. I just threw in some fabric when I was doing these test sample things. I know it looks upside down, and it is, but I'm not using it, so that's okay. So now I flipped it over to the back again. We're working on the back side first. And gosh, I should have flipped all these before I started doing this video. Okay, so now we're going to take this back, finger press it. Just scoot your fingernail along this edge of the seam that you have pushed toward the other block. Your fingernail will give it a nice little finger press. It'll stay in place. You don't really need to use an iron. And then we're going to add that second block. Now, what I did is I flipped my first block so it's facing me. The folded edge, top edge of the sashing and the block is on top. I have the back still facing up. That's my second block. The back is right under here and it's facing up. I'm going to lay out my 2-inch piece that I finger pressed open. I'm going to lay that directly along the next block. See, there it is. So the backs are facing each other. We have the one that I finger pressed open right in here. This is it here. And that is going to be stitched right down here. The top folded sashing will not be touched at this time. So now this is nicer because you have a nice little satin edge that you can see, which is always nice. But you're going to do your seam once again. Run it right along the edge of that satin and put it all the way down to the end. Just another photo to give you an idea, and it's 1/2 inch. Now you see, this is what I did because my seam was not straight. You know, I just ran it down real quick. It wasn't straight. I didn't like it because some of the white edge was showing between this satin and the red sashing. So I did another seam. You know, you play with it till you get it exactly the way you want it. Okay, now this is your front piece. You're working on the front now. This is the quilt as you go process. You have a complete block with raw edges. You're adding the sashing to cover up the raw edges to join your blocks together. And this is now the front with the folded edge over here, the open edge over here, and we're going to flip this over this way. Okay, you can see where I took another little smidge of seam allowance there. Now, here's the other option I mentioned, and it's a good option. I do like that this satin butts right up to this binding. And, you know, it looks really nice, except I have red satin on most of my blocks. I wanted to use red sashing, but with red satin and red sashing, something's going to be lost along the way. I'm going to lose that effect, that, that big pop of satin edging. And I'm not sure I want to do that. If you decide that you would prefer to have a little bit of white showing in here, so this satin square really pops, you can use 1/4 inch seams. Your sashing must be changed. The size of the sashing will be different if you're using 1/4 inch seams. Now I'm using a 1/2 inch seam. I need 1/2 inch for seam allowance. I need the 1 inch, which is the 1/2 and 1/2, to flip over here, plus a 1/2 inch seam allowance for the other side. That's why I set a 2 inch piece. If you go with a 1/4 inch seam, so that you have some white showing between the satin edging and your sashing, then you'll need to use a 1/4 and a 1/2, which is 1 inch. So you'll have a 1 inch strip. For now, I'm only going to continue to discuss the 2 inch with the sashing button right up to the satin edge. But just so you know, there's an option, and I like it. Okay, now we've got our back on. I'm happy with that. I'm going to work on my front. This is the folded edge over here. It's going to go and meet right here. So I found, and I knew this was going to be a thing, and I think I mentioned it in one of my posts or in one of my comments. When you fold this 3 inch piece, that fold takes, I don't know, a 1/16th, a 32nd. It takes off a smidge of your fabric, your width. When I cut my 3 inch pieces going forward, I'm going to give them a smidge more, like a 1/16th or so more, so that I can cover up this little red line of stitching, because I do not want that to show on my finished table runner, quilt, or whatever it is I'm going to make. I'll make it a table runner and quilt, I hope, someday. But give yourself a little bit of extra room. Or when you press it, don't press it exactly in half. Just press it almost in half. That way you give yourself a little bit of allowance. It can make a difference. The other option is to trim a little bit of this white block edging. Now if you trim a little bit of that, you'll be able to pull this part over more. And you'll see this process in just a sec. You see here? And now I can stretch it, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to lay nicer. And if I pull on this sashing to pull it over this way, when my project is finished, I'm afraid that it will be a little, it won't lay nice. And I can block it. I can spritz it with water or whatever and steam it or press it. But I don't really want to do any of that. I want it to be right. And I think that that little bit of a fold took away, but you can overcome that by not folding this exactly in half. Leave like a 1/16th or an 1/8 of an inch. Give yourself some allowance, a little bit of ease. Or trim down this block. Now, one of the reasons I went with this sashing button right up to this satin edge is obvious in this photo, or maybe it's the photo prior to this. You see this? It's inevitable. You're doing a lot of stitching in here. You're pulling on your fabric. You might have a little bit of not quite puckers. It's not in your design. It's outside of your design. But because that part is not stitched down, it's kind of wavy. If you go with a little bit of white in here between the satin and the sashing, you'll have to be more careful about joining the size of the sashing and the block so they are still at the exact 4 inch or 5 inch full size. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now we're ready to fold it over. Now the folded edge is going right along this edge, and I trimmed a smidge of this white underneath to make it fit nicer. And I really want a nice, clean, straight edge all the way down. I'm just real particular about that kind of stuff. A wavy line just wouldn't look nice. And here it is with, I don't know what this white is that's showing because it's actually a folded edge. It's just the photo, the way the photo was taken, I guess. But I didn't match it up real well, and I ripped it out because I wanted my nice straight line. I am really, really fussy. I'm a pain in the butt. I know I am. Okay, so now I'm happy. I got a nice even line. It's nice and straight. That looks good to me. But you see the red and red? I'd have to change the color of my sashing because I feel like it takes away from it. The red and blue is nice. It pops. So I'll probably change the color of my sashing because I did them all in red, and I'm not going to do them over. We all know how long it took to make one of these blocks, right? But this is the finish. It's a beautiful finish on your top. That was my correction of my mistake. And you can see where in here is where I just trimmed off a smidge of the white fabric to make it fit nicer and lay nicer. So that's it. That's all my photos. I am seriously video challenged. I'm sorry to say my videos, taking them as I stitch, my editing skills are bad, really bad. And I'm sorry, I truly wish I could have made videos for every single step of this sew along because it's really very exciting, very enjoyable. I'm loving it. I think that a lot of you are doing this for the first time, and I'm thrilled with that. I love that you're stepping outside of your comfort zone and, you know, taking on a new challenge. So good on you. Keep it going. Do not give up. Finish this. Don't put this in your unfinished object box. Those UFOs, some people have for 20 years, and I know I've got my own, a big basket of them. This will not be one. Let's all finish this and say, you know, give yourself a pat in the back. Say, yeah, I did it. I can.